Good morning. The Monday, September 16th Performance Committee will now come to order. We are convened as of 8:30 a.m. and I would respectfully ask anyone attending this meeting to mute yourself unless you are recognized to speak. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Please note that committee meetings of the RTD Board of Directors will be held remotely via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. The meeting recordings along with the unofficial minutes of the meetings will be posted as soon as practicable on the board's website. During today's meeting, we are also providing communication access real-time translation, also known as CART. Anyone who would like access to this service should be sent an email to the RTD board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com, and a link will be provided. Additionally, the CART transcript can be automatically translated into Spanish for anyone who would like access to a live transcript of this meeting in Spanish. A live stream of this meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. I would like to now call the roll for the committee members. Director Davidson.
Here.
Director Geisinger.
Here.
Director Guzman.
I'm here.
Director Rosenthal will no longer be on the committee due to work scheduling conflict. Director Tisdale.
Present.
And I am Director Catlin, and I am present. So for the record, we have 5 directors present. So I would like to open public comment to anyone who would like to address the committee regarding any topic listed in the published meeting agenda for the current and immediately preceding month. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. During this time, the committee will not offer any direct comment, or responses. However, if you need to be contacted regarding your public comment, please email the RTD board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com. Board office manager Kroll, are there any hands raised for public comments?
Good morning, Committee Chair Catlin. This is Executive Manager Jack Kroll. There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, then, have we received any emails or comments in writing?
Not specifically to anything listed on the agenda, but we do have an email from Julian Latch, who had asked to be present for this meeting, looking for an update on the state of the speed restrictions. I don't see that on the agenda for today's meeting. We would be happy to correspond with Mr. Latch via email to give him the most up-to-date information on the speed restrictions.
Thank you, Mr. Kroll. That would be helpful, and if you could keep us, everyone on this call apprised of the correspondence, that would be great.
Great.
So no other participants in the queue, we will close the public comment period at this time.
Committee Chair Catlin, I just wanted to also interject here and note for the record that Director Lewis is also present at the meeting.
Thank you for the reminder. I didn't mean to overlook you, Director Lewis. And I don't see any other directors who are on the call. There are 2 discussion items this morning. We had intended to have 3 discussion items, but we were not able to make enough progress on the KPI conversation from last month to warrant returning the item to the agenda. This matter needs to come back before us in October. And suffice it to say that we've been working on it. Director Davidson and Director Geisinger and I have worked on yet another draft of this, and we will be bringing it forward to Ms. Johnson and her team to try and work through this item, but look for that item in October. The first discussion item is for the 2024/25 strategic initiatives. Deborah Johnson, General Manager and CEO, and John McKay, Executive Business Partner. Would you present this item to the committee?
Thank you very much, Committee Chair Catlin. Good morning to all that are assembled. I am Deborah Johnson. I serve as the General Manager and Chief Executive Officer of the Regional Transportation District. As indicated, I am joined with John McKay, the Executive Business Partner, and we will provide an update relative to 2024-2025 strategic initiatives. So with that, if you could advance the next slide, please. What I intend to do this morning in conjunction with Mr. McKay is talk to you and orient you to our performance cycle, which basically aligns with how we show up and do our work for all non-representative employees. I will speak to you about phase 1 of 2023 through 2024, and Mr. McKay will touch upon phase 2, and we'll continue on with next steps. So advancing into the performance cycle. As you see before you with this diagram, it's critically important to showcase how we utilize our strategic plan in relationship to our 4 strategic priorities, which are customer excellence, community value, employee ownership, as well as financial success. And within those 4 strategic priorities, we work collectively as the team. And when I say we, the we is identified by the leadership team, management teams, and those individuals that comprise said teams at various levels throughout the organization. We collectively plan our goals that are in alignment with the strategic plan. Throughout the performance period, we monitor individuals' performance, and then we review performance. It's important to note that we as non-represented staff went forward with a performance review period whereby we got on track, and we had an 18-month period to bring us to a phase whereby we commence our performance review cycle July 1st of each year and end on June 30. Recognizing the time frame I just outlined, we just are in the process of finalizing the performance review process for all non-represented employees. This context is important as you'll understand the presentation as we go forward, and also in your board materials with the discussion item that's in your packet on page 3 and page 4. It gives you an outline of what that is and how we went about that. Next slide, please. So it's critically important here as we look at this pyramid to understand visually how this all feeds into what we do collectively in reference to our individual performance. You can clearly see at the base of the pyramid, we as individual employees have specific goals, which are all tied into our performance. Quite naturally, we outline how we're going to get there with tactics, i.e. leading indicators. Those leading indicators run the gamut as we look at asset management, internal communication, employee recruitment, employee retention, employee security, as well as public security, because we've identified key initiatives that basically we wanted to hone in on, recognizing that we do have a 5-year strategic plan and we couldn't tackle everything at once. But those elements have been informed by the input we have garnered through our community surveys. And so as we look at the strategic initiatives, that is the 3rd level within the pyramid, we can clearly see back to basics, people power, and welcoming transit environment. Those elements are described on package page 4 in reference to how we identify what that means. But you've heard us say constantly, back to basics. We're focused on asset management, people power. How are we hiring and retaining employees, and how are those employees showing up? And then a welcoming transit environment, keeping in mind that our critical core mission is transit service delivery. We want to ensure that people have an optimal experience when utilizing our system, and more importantly for our employees who are performing the task, to ensure that we can make good on our core mission of delivering transit services, as well as making lives better through connections. So then as you look at the strategic priorities that you are familiar with, it's how we are going to concentrate on the life of the plan. And those are the strategic priorities I mentioned at the outset of my remarks, i.e. their long-term goals captured in the agency performance scorecard that are centered upon customer excellence, community value, employee ownership, and financial success. Quite naturally, the next level is values. What do we stand for, and how are we showing up doing our work? If we weren't doing it with intention relative to being passionate about what we're doing, actually showcasing respect, having diversity of thought, experience, and people And standing in our truth and being forthright in reference to what we do and collaborating and taking a sense of ownership, not only for how we deliver work, but also in reference to taking ownership in ourselves for our personal growth and development, it would be for naught relative to how we would make lives better through connections. And then this feeds into our vision, what we aspire to achieve, which is clearly to be the trusted leader in mobility, delivering excellence and value to our customers and community. And so when we go back to the strategic priorities, we basically look at short-term goals that are captured in the annual scorecard, hence their orientation to the previous slide relative to the strat initiatives, as well as the priorities relative to team members' performance goals. Next slide, please. So as I indicated previously, as we talk about strategic initiatives, it's critically important to understand that while we have these initiatives, i.e. focused on back to basics, you may have received earlier this morning the stakeholder communication where we showcase what we've been doing relative to back to basics. We're able to complete the coping panels project. We basically finished the 5 intersections of our first light rail line relative to ensuring that's in a state of good repair with the 5 intersections. As we look at internal communications here at the organization, recognizing that we garnered a lot of input from our colleagues relative to ensuring that information is disseminated and they could understand what was happening in the organization prior to learning about it in some external source. We've been intentional with that through the means of various communications focused on our Inside Connections, our newsletter, what we put up in the divisions relative what's happening, communicating out and even sending information to people's residences relative to the addresses that they have on file. Quite naturally, we would be useless in a sense if we didn't have people that are providing the vast services that RTD is known for. But we have to keep in mind, while we have customers where we want to serve, without our internal people power, we would not be able to move people to and fro. So we've had a laser-like focus on employee recruitment and employee retention, and we've seen some notable results. And then certainly, last but not least, is the welcoming transit environment, whereby we've had a laser focus on employee security, because it's important if we're going to retain employees that we can create an optimal work environment when people are out in their mobile offices. We don't have control over who our customers are, recognizing the optimal word there is public as relates to public transportation, but we basically can listen and lean in and do what we can to optimize that environment. And taking care of the individuals that comprise the agency will in turn enable us to help with our customers to create a more favorable experience when they're utilizing our system. Next slide. So this is just an example of one of the initiatives and what we have done collectively. On August 10th, we had a strategic planning workshop, and we've had these several times throughout the year, so we can do a check-in relative to where we are collectively as a leadership and management team. And as I indicated, this is just one of the strategic initiatives, hence the watermark sample. But what we've done is looked at our action steps and looked at our status, and then we can discern where we are. And that helps feed into the individual performance goals relative to the performance period, with each contributor feeding into their division, feeding into their department, then feeding into the agency, enabling us to be better in what we're doing to optimize those scores that we would like to see relative to our net promoter score and community satisfaction. So just as an example here, looking at action steps, we talked about relative to people power, with employee recruitment being the specific tactic, to establish monthly recurring meetings with hiring managers. That is something that the HR department has done, specifically when we look at some of the areas where we've had challenges with our people power. So what does that mean in lay terms? It's meeting with Dave Jensen's staff and maintenance of way, for instance, as we look at track maintainers. And basically, we have seen some great results with that, because they have been able to hone in on the numbers relative to who we're hiring, what the needs are, What do the turnover rates look like? And so while we have that as completed, that is something that we have completed, but that doesn't mean that's going away. That means that it's going to basically set the foundation for how we go about doing work relative to employee recruitment. Next, as it relates to Workday, for your edification, Workday is our human resource management software tool, and you guys have used that for some elements in reference to the board members having access to benefits and things of the like. But what we did was create a dashboard within Workday so we understand where we are. Now, while it says in progress, it's in progress because now that has been rolled into daily work. That will be commonplace as we go forward. Develop and implement an e-skills program. E-skills being electronic skills program, whereby we have training that's readily available and individuals can go in and look at where they are and identify key elements that they may want to hone in on for the betterment of themselves as we look at employee ownership in reference to a value, because that's critically important. We want to ensure that we have individuals that are equipped with the tools and the training and the professional learning that they need to be their optimal selves. And that's something else that has been rolled into our daily activities. Build out the talent acquisition team. Charlene Pelleggi, our Chief People Officer, has done a yeoman's job, and we have had some dynamic hires that have come into the organization. Hence, that's why we're able to look at that first action step relative to establishing monthly recurring meetings with hiring managers, because now we have talent acquisition team members and human resource business partners that are readily available and assigned specifically to divisions within departments to help hone in on our talent pool. And then last but certainly not least, as an example, is review, analyze, and refine RTD's current recruitment and selection process. Being intentional in the beginning when we look to hire an individual for a role, basically mapping out the timeline. So if you're going to have an external interview panel, that you have that shored up so you can let the candidate know, okay, we anticipate receiving applications on September 15th. On October 15th, there will be a panel interview comprised of 3 individuals, and we look to make a decision no later than October 31st. That way, if somebody is really honed in on wanting to work for the Regional Transportation District and they're weighing other options, they have an understanding of what to expect relative to the timeline. So going forward with the next slide, I will yield the floor to John McKay, and I'd like to basically give him a shout out. He has stepped in, he has leaned in and showed up and showed out as it relates to taking this on with his team of performance analysts. Just at the workshop we had on August 10th, received favorable feedback from employees that participated and said this was the best one yet. So I wanted to take this opportunity and give John his flowers in the presence of all of you and those that are assembled, because he's done a yeoman's job. And with that, Mr. McKay, I will yield the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. As noted, I am John McKay, Executive Business Partner. Talking through the second half of this presentation. This, as GM CEO noted, we did just complete the 2023-2024 employee performance cycle. And so in order to launch into the next year's performance cycle, we needed to take a look at the strategic initiatives to see where we could improve matters as related to the strategic priorities and success outcomes related thereto. So in order to do that, as she noted, in August, we held an employee strategic planning session workshop and identified areas where, as she noted in a couple of slides ago, that there were items that we did complete, items that we still need to work on, and then potentially other items that we didn't even have on our menu at that point in time. So that's where these hashed boxes are for. They indicate that there are other things that maybe we could be focusing on. So with that, in order to determine where we needed to improve things, we took a look at some survey data that we'd collected over the last year. And in the responses to those surveys, if there were a key driver, and I'll speak to that in a moment, that indicated importance to the customers of the community, that's something that we took a look at. If the responses were below 75%, that indicated an area that we could potentially take a look at. And then if there were a favorable response decline year over year, that's another area. And in the Venn diagram there, where those circles overlap, those really indicated where we needed to focus effort. Or alternatively, in the areas where the response rate was lower than 50%, that's definitely an indicator that's something that we needed to work on. And from that activity, we determined that there were 4 main focus areas that could use a little bit of work. And I'll get into those in a second, but just to name them, they are access to employment centers, on-time performance, both perceived and actual, personal security for customers and for community members, and then tools to grow people's career within the agency. We also took a look at the key driver analyses for each of the surveys over the last year. And just to walk through this briefly, so on the y-axis is the satisfaction rating. The higher the score, the higher the indicator that people are happy with RTD's performance in that area, and then the importance rating. The farther to the right on the x-axis, the more important it is to the people who are responding. And a key driver analysis, just note, is a methodology used in market research to identify the key drivers, or behaviors. So looking at the light rail as an example, you can see from this that the item A, frequency, how often the trains come, is by far and away the most important thing to people who responded to the survey. So because it is in the bottom right-hand quadrant, we can tell that this is an area of where we could add effort to receive more favorable ratings from the consumers or from the customers. If we were to improve frequency, then we would definitely see an improvement in customer satisfaction. So luckily, Chris Tatham from ETC Institute walked through this with us last week, so hopefully everyone is familiar with key driver analyses. So I won't go through each one. This is just a sample for light rail specifically. Alternatively, if you also look down at the bottom left quadrant, so we also have the Q score there is for personal security while riding the train. So we can tell that if this is not particularly important to the people who responded to the survey, and this is the 2023 data, we still haven't received the 2024 data. Those surveys were just completed in September. But this shows that for item Q, their personal security, it is both low in terms of satisfaction rating, but also low in terms of importance for customers. As I noticed before, those Venn diagrams where the areas intersected and where there was a key driver that we've seen is important to people, that's where we determined these are the items that needed to focus for 2024 and 25 with respect to for the employees' performance goals. So these are the things that we will be working on individually and with respect to the strategic initiatives in 2024-25, and we'll show you a scorecard here at the end of this presentation to go through that. So related to access to employment centers, we are focusing on increasing the percentage of community that agrees or strongly agrees that RTD serves employment centers. For the 2024-25 the survey cycle, we're actually changing that terminology to major activity centers, but just to incorporate things like event venues and major commercial hubs, things like that. Employment centers doesn't quite hit the mark, but that's something we'll be tweaking slightly next year. Related to on-time performance, we're working on increasing the percent of services that arrive within the current prescribed on-time performance metrics for each mode, and increasing the percentage of customers who agree or strongly agree that buses or trains usually run on time. I'm noting here, these are the remaining focus areas on hold for 2024-25. The response was that we're looking at increasing the percentage of customers who agree or strongly agree that RT's fares are reasonable, given that the 2024 fare change just went into effect in January of this year. We're not really sure that how customers feel about the fares right now, and using that data would probably be premature. We'll take a look at that once the customer survey data comes back. Related to personal security, we're looking at increasing the percentage of customers who feel personally secure and the number of community members who feel personally secure while using RTD services. And related to employee professional development, this is one of the items that was identified in the employee survey, that we're increasing the percentage of employees who agree or strongly agree that RTD provides them with the tools needed to grow their career. Again, a note, I think that data is wrong, but the strategic planning workshop, we did take a look at the 2023-24 strategic initiatives. We took a data-driven process, like I just walked through, to identify the elements to adjust. And then in addition to that, we also held breakout groups among all the senior managers and department heads and leaders who were engaged in that workshop to see if there are any other things that really needed to drive focus for the next year. And there were some key items that were identified during that process. We had breakout sessions and brainstorming to determine leading indicators, and I'll go into that slide here in a moment, leading indicators to identify areas in which we could focus efforts in order to improve our outcomes. On the following week, on August 14th, the leadership team met to develop the 2024-25 strategic initiatives and tactics based on the feedback that we received from the workshop, the activities that we performed in that workshop. And then over the course of the last month, I and my team have been developing the annual scorecard and developing leading indicators to help us focus effort on those areas. And a brief refresher on leading indicators versus lagging indicators. A leading indicator is a predictive measure of future performance. It's something you have direct control over. It's measurable in the short term. These are subject to change. A leading indicator is something that, it's a predictive thing that you may not know the answer. If you tweak Y and then X happens, then you know that there's a pretty strong correlation between those two things. So we as staff need to be able to change those things because it's sort of like a little laboratory. We're identifying where we can put effort, and if there's a positive change associated with that, then we know that we can keep doing that. A lagging indicator, these are the indicators that we capture on our agency performance scorecard that would be in the middle of the strategic plan for 2021 through 2026. This is the scorecard that people are familiar with more than likely. And we'll be talking about that in a later item in this meeting. A lagging indicator is something that provides a snapshot of performance and what has already happened. So these are after the fact. The outcomes are not controlled directly. In RTD's case, these tend to be annual metrics because they're predicated upon survey data by and large, and they're communicated to larger audiences. Moving on to next steps. Again, this is a refresher on the pyramid of hierarchy here, where employee performance goals are at the bottom. This is the base of everything that we do here. That leads into the tactics. Those employee goals are informed by the tactics, which are in themselves informed by the strategic initiatives, which support the strategic priorities established by the board and the success outcomes associated with those, which feed up to the values, the mission, and then the vision. In a moment here, we'll be talking about the annual scorecard. I'll give a brief overview of that. This is still in development. I just wanted to point that out. We are in the process of identifying a monitoring cadence for these things. We're working with staff to determine how often these things can be measured. There's a back-end software product that we're looking at to enhance that process. And here's a sneak preview of our 2024-25 strategic initiatives for staff. In the next week or so, we'll be communicating this with employees as they start to launch their new goal setting process for 2024-25. In your packet, there was a slight typo that the internal communications item was still on there. We've determined that the internal communications items that were on the strategic initiatives for 2023-24 were largely accomplished. Those that weren't accomplished were rolled into daily work. And so under the Back to Basics strategic initiative, we're focusing on asset management again for this year. For people power, the same, both employee recruitment and retention will still remain. For a welcoming transit environment, employee security and public security are still very important and still could use some work. And then the new one, brand new in purple at the bottom, customer and community connections is our fourth strategic initiative. And there's a focus on customer experience and community outreach. And then this is the definitions for these things, by and large, were unchanged. The definition for Back to Basics, the internal communications aspect is no longer contained there, but for customer and community connections, the definition is RTD is committed to fostering community building and enriching the customer experience. And for next steps, like I said, we will be communicating these strategic initiatives with staff, and we're obviously doing that in this committee here. So this is now public. These are public for this year. The annual scorecard will be disseminated so that employees can start performance planning for next year and identifying personal goals related to their job that will also help improve employee agency performance overall. In the longer term, we will be holding more either quarterly or biannual workshops or meetings with senior managers and directors and leads of departments along with the leadership team to track the progress related to those strategic initiatives. And then employees will be holding performance check-ins with their supervisors and managers to determine their progress against those goals that they've set related to the strategic initiatives. And with that, I will stop sharing this screen and then move over to my other screen here. So this will be a little small here, but I will zoom into the extent I can. Okay, so here is the annual scorecard. As noted, there are four. There are the same four that I just went through: back to basics, people power, welcoming transit environment, and customer and community connections. We have the tactics associated with those, an annual metric. These are the metrics that are in the agency performance scorecard that will need to be improved by way of these leading indicators that we've identified. So for under back to basics, we have one referencing the financial health ratios utilized by the Office of the State Auditor. There are 9 of those that were seen in the last performance audit, or the governance audit rather, that was performed by the OSA. RTD is adopting those as measures of financial health. And so the percentage of those that are met is now one of our metrics. The percentage will be measured on a regular basis, and if there are any of those indicators that could use some support, then we'll report on those to the general manager and CEO so that she will be fully apprised of that and can adjust course as necessary. I won't go through all of these. This is a snapshot. It's in the packet. I'm happy to take questions on this at the appropriate time, but let me zoom down here just for a moment here and focus on the new one that we've identified as the Customer and Community Connections Strategic Initiative, with focus on customer experience and community outreach. We've identified these as the leading indicators in order to predict where we can improve things. We will engage in efforts to the percentage of operated trips versus scheduled. We think that if we operate a high number of trips versus those scheduled, then we will improve the response to the question in the survey of percentage of the community that agrees or strongly agrees that RTD serves employment centers. And with that, I will stop sharing and open the floor for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson and Mr. McKay. That was a very good presentation, very thorough. Are there any comments from directors? Director Tisdale, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wanted to direct your attention to page 13 of the packet relative to this key driver analysis for light rail with the 4 boxes there. And I note in looking at that items F and Q are, thank you for bringing up the screen. F is personal security on the train, and Q is personal security while waiting for the train. If you'll note, they're in the lower left quadrant of that box. And that leads me to have less than high confidence in this pictograph. I do not believe that it is low importance or a low priority. I know there's low satisfaction as listed, but that it's a low priority for our customers for either personal security on the train or personal security while waiting for the train. So therefore, questioning that, I'm wondering, can you tell me, and I recognize it says the word sample across the whole thing here, what is the source for these data?
Madam Chair.
Please.
So these are self-identified. These were from the customer. This is actually the 2023 customer for light rail, the 2023 responses. Customers are asked to rank their responses to these questions. So of the people engaged with, these are hierarchical, with A being the most important to individuals who responded, and the Q being the lowest response. As noted, these are 2023 data. This could have changed over time. We will be receiving the 2024 data here within the matter of days. Those surveys, as I noted, were just completed within the last month. And so that could have shifted over time. We've seen in other agencies that, let's say, train cleanliness. It can, even though it's in the middle of the pack here for the 2023 cycle, we could see that this could jump all the way to the top for 2024, or vice versa. The personal security could also jump high. But as of 2023, this was the customer's preferred ranking of these items. And not to say that anything is insignificant or important, just these are the most important things to the customers that we engaged with respect to that survey.
At
McKay,
least
if I
as
may.
to- I'm sorry, please go on ahead, General Manager.
Thank you, Director Tisdale. I was just going to say, during next month's meeting cycle, we will see the results for 2024. And to amplify the point that Mr. McKay put forward, some of these could have shifted, but recognizing the prioritization during the course of the snapshot in time being the September timeframe in 2023, this is what individuals saw as most important.
Thank you for that response. So the people who responded, however many there were, and I forget the number, that's what they said. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Director Geisinger?
Thank you very much, and thanks very much for this presentation and all the good work. I just wanted to say that, just so it's not one person asking, I had exactly the same question. That seems, and I hear that you've got more info coming, and also I'm glad to see that it's still on your priority list for addressing, but it just seemed weird to me that it would be low satisfaction and low importance in terms of personal security. So thanks for looking at it.
Director Davidson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, Mr. McKay, for this, and certainly Mr. McKay, thank you for leaning in, as Ms. Johnson highlighted here. Helpful to really hear the understanding, and I know this is something that we've talked about a couple of times in past meetings about the forthcoming annual scorecard here. So it's really helpful. I wanted to make sure that I'm following along okay with how this ties out, and then had one follow-up question around the intersection between departments and kind of the interplay. So actually, I'll take the example of packet page 18, which is the key driver analysis of light rail, and recognizing that's 2023 data and is provided here as sample. Highlighted in the areas of opportunity includes frequency, how often the train comes. Then when we go to the scorecard, which is on packet page 30, this is the annual scorecard. I know one concern that this committee has raised in terms of its analysis of agency performance is that we've been very heavy on perception. If I look down on that sheet about 2/3 of the way down, I see percentage of customers who agree or strongly agree that the service is on time. But the leading indicator, there are two that tie into some of this on time, which is, there's one, which is percent of on time terminal departures. There is another around reliability, which is percent of operated trips versus scheduled. So I'd imagine that the idea here is we've identified the key driver, as we've seen on that packet page 18 or slide 13, tied that out into some actual leading metrics we can measure with the hypothesis that, okay, if we improve that frequency, it's going to ultimately improve the perception. I guess I want to make sure that I'm tying that out correctly. You walked us through all of that, Mr. McKay. I just want to make sure that I'm echoing it back properly. And my follow-up question to that before handing off the floor there is, if I'm tracking that correctly, sometimes leading and lagging can be different depending on which angle you're coming from, particularly different departments. And I would imagine that percentage of on-time terminal departures has a lot of, in many ways, that's a lagging for the leading of other departments that might feed into that, things that they need to be doing from a maintenance standpoint, staffing levels, our extra board, all of those types of things. So I'm wondering if you can comment, first of all, whether I've characterized everything correctly, but then second of all, what kinds of dialogues are happening in these workshops around the interdependencies of departments and how their respective metrics tie in together, which I realize this particular report you showed didn't get into that level of detail, but it'd be helpful to hear what kind of interactions happening between those departments.
Mr. McKay?
GMC Johnson, did you have something to say first? It looked like.
Yeah, so I just want to start out and then I'll yield the floor to Mr. McKay. And I know Mr. Jensen is on this call as well, because it's very important that we understand the direction in which we're going, because everything we do is interdependent. Recognizing our core business function here at this agency is to deliver transit service. If in fact we do not have vehicles, if we don't have facilities, then it's for naught. What's critically important as we talk about changing the perception is honing in on the leading indicators. So for instance, if we're going to change the perception of individuals, and Mr. Jensen and I just talked about this last week, it's ensuring that we have gap trains available. And what I mean by a gap train is if we're trying to clear a platform after a special event, we need to have trains in a pocket, because you can easily lose the schedule. But if you can actually put a consensus in the midst of that, then to the average customer, it appears as if they did not miss a trip, even though we may have missed a scheduled trip, right? Because basically what we're doing is utilizing and being intentional and being strategic relative to delivering service to manage the expectation of the customer, therefore creating a better customer experience. And so as we talk about that, and Mr. Jensen, I'm gonna yield the floor to you momentarily, as we look at maintenance of way, we have to ensure that if we're doing preventative maintenance, we have a window that's well enough and we can power down in sufficient amount of time to get the crews out there. Then we can power up so we can get all our colleagues off of the right of way, so we can ensure that we are leaving the terminal on time. So Mr. Jensen, would you like to further elaborate?
Yes, I will. And Chair Davidson, I think that you were tracking exactly right. The internal, am I not trans? You can hear me?
Mhm.
Okay, so exactly what you alluded to, the internal conversations, which in our minds can be either leading or lagging, mechanical, for instance. So the vehicle maintenance team is evaluating all of the failures, all of the preventative maintenance programs, looking for where there may be delays. If a train breaks down, there's a stronger likelihood that we'll drop a trip. So in our efforts to reduce the number of mechanical failures, we can improve the level of service that we can provide. And that's across the board. It's maintenance of way. Even the preventative maintenance, when we shut down, for instance, to do wire work or track work, we may lose some service initially, but over the long haul, we gained that level of service. And so it's really identifying for us where those items are, what they are that would cause us to lose service, whether it's personnel, whether it's maintenance, whether it's state of good repair, and get ahead of those things in a proactive manner to increase the level of service over the long term. And so I hope that answers your question, but that's the way we're working on it internally.
And then, Mr. Jensen, if I can just say for the record here, you mentioned mechanical failure. So that is a lagging indicator that is commonplace within the industry, which is the mean distance between failures. And hence, to the point that he just made, working with, his relative divisions within, then we can better, increase our mean distance between failures that will yield to better scheduled trip allocation, but in such short time, therefore you could utilize a gap train, and then it increases the perception of the customer relative to experience and how many trips have been made.
Mr. McKay, I see your hand up. Did you want to add to that?
Thank you. Yeah, just adding on to those comments that Dave Jensen, Fred Worthen, the Assistant General Manager of Bus Operations, they have the opportunity now that we have the strategic initiatives for the next cycle, they can empower their employees, their superintendents and managers within their divisions to take these goals on. They can work with them to craft goals for the 2024-25 cycle that will impact these goals. So Mr. Jensen could have an employee working for him who's solely focused on increasing the percentage of operated trips versus scheduled, so that we can see improvement in that area, which will in turn improve the response of the community, the percentage of the community that agrees or strongly agrees that RTD is on time in the next performance cycle. So it gets down to the granular level. It starts at the very bottom with the staff on the bottom of that pyramid. They build goals that impact that are associated with the tactics that impact the strategic initiatives, which in turn impact the strategic priorities it's a cycle, it's a system.
Thank you very much. That well addresses what I was aiming at, and thank you, Madam Chair, for indulging the discussion there. And I would just say thank you for that kind of united approach. I know this is difficult and comprehensive, but I think this is, you know, I'm starting to see how this is coming together in terms of a unified approach in terms of these strategic initiatives. So I appreciate the comments on that. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Director Lewis, please.
Yes, you were saying that, you know, we've been focusing on the rail. I'm just curious, next month when we get this 2024 numbers, will that include bus? Have we measured the bus customers?
If I may, Madam Chair. So Director Lewis, thank you for your question. Basically, with our community value and customer surveys, we look at all modalities as we go forward. Last week, you were able to see paratransit, you will see bus, and you will see rail. And that will inform the data as we go forward quite naturally relative to what it is that we're doing. And that's hence why this was a sample. And so, Mr. McKay, if you could further expound.
Thank you very much. For this cycle, we did do the community and paratransit surveys over the summertime, just because those are not intercept surveys, and so we're able to capture the responses at a time when the survey consultant could take those. We do like to do the intercept surveys during the time when school is in session, so that we have the same sort of the metrics that we're able to use over the course of the year. It provides a better snapshot for us. In 2025, we will be shifting the timing of both the community and customer surveys, as well as the employee surveys, earlier in the year, so that we have this data earlier on in the cycle, so that we can, as the budget is being developed, as the performance cycle for 2025-26 is being developed, we'll have better responses from our most recent surveys available for us. So,
I have a second question, Madam Chair.
Please.
On the employee development, do we differentiate between the skills needed for the job versus professional development? Because those are really two different things. So when I think of special skills, I'm thinking, and I apologize, there's some sirens outside my window here. Special skills mean specific to that job, whether it be computer skills or whatever. And professional development's more like, oh, let's teach you how to do public speaking. Let's help you manage conflict. So I'm curious, do we differentiate between those two?
If I may.
Ms. Johnson, go ahead.
Yes, we do, Director Lewis, most certainly, because there could be a position, if I looked at, you know, a civil engineering position, we would want to register professional engineer in the state of Colorado. On the flip side of it, if I have somebody in vehicle maintenance and we have Siemens rail cars, we may send them to a specific training relative to Siemens so they understand the mechanical portions of that vehicle. Or if we have a New Flyer bus, they may need to go to New Flyer. So they wouldn't come in with that skill set. We're providing them with the necessary skills to do their job. More specifically, as we talk about various values, we just went through a manager and supervisorial training that gave them the basic elements. But I did see Ms. Pileggi come on screen. I'm sorry I didn't see you earlier. I will yield the floor to her so she can expound more greatly, since this is her area of expertise.
Ms. Pileggi.
Thank you. Just how is my sound? Is my audio okay? Great. Charlene Pileggi, as noted, Chief People Officer. I'll just add additional context. What GM Johnson indicated is correct. The professional development is more geared, it's more employee driven. So it's their professional development areas that they may want to grow, either moving along in their career or just enhancing the skill sets that they already have. And when there are specific skills that we require as an organization, as GM Johnson indicated, that's different from professional development. That would be a mandated training that we then provide. So that would be the answer I would give. Hopefully that addresses your question, Director Lewis.
So I'm hearing that the skill set is specific to the job, but we're not providing any professional development outside of their job.
No, sir, I would say no. Professional development outside of their job could be, we have an electromechanic who is getting a master's degree, or pardon me, a bachelor's degree in science. That is their professional development. They are developing outside of their job, but it's driven more by the employee is the difference.
Yeah, I just like to see for professional development in general, maybe classes offered to them that would just increase their ability to maybe switch jobs within the organization. I think one of the biggest issues for people is they kind of get stuck in a job and they can't get out of it. They don't have the money to go for that bachelor's degree. So, maybe having professional development classes within the organization would help them climb that ladder. So something to consider for the future, that not all of the training has to be specific to their job, but could be skill sets that they could use to apply to other work that they would apply for within the organization. I think that helps with retention. So I hope you guys take a peek at that. Thank you.
So if I can just speak to that, Director Catlin or Chair Catlin, please, we do have a professional development program. We actually have monies that are set aside for professional development. And every employee is allocated a certain amount of money. And Ms. Pileggi can expound, because we don't look at it as a career ladder. As she has eloquently said, we look at it as career constellations, because somebody could come in, garner a better understanding through volunteerism, working on different projects, and have a desire to go in a totally different direction. We do have individuals, there is somebody in particular that's top of mind for me that works in Charlene's area, who is a human resources representative who started out as a bus operator. So we have clear-cut examples of individuals that have been able to leverage the constellations and utilize the programs that we have readily available. Not only do we provide them internally, where we have a laser focus with the learning and development plan, whereby we're going to have micro-credential programs coming into the 2025 year. We also have opportunities external to the organization as well. So Ms. Pileggi, I just wanted to say that, because that was something critical as I came into the organization that I wanted to see established. And I know you have been honing in on that and shepherding that for the agency with Dr. McDowell's assistance.
Yeah, Chair, if I just may add.
Please.
Thank you. Just want to expand what we are building out today. We have many employees who have moved across the organization, starting in one position and also one area, and then moving in different areas, as GM Johnson has indicated. Previously, early in my tenure, which is only a year and 8 months, but we had identified these career constellations, but also the ability, given the diversity of the agency, to actually have it be a differentiator, that we could actually, you could have a full career at RTD. So I want to be clear, if there's skill training required to do the job that you're in today, that is provided by the agency. There are also internal programs that are being developed, like a manager and supervisor certification training that every new supervisor and manager would take, but also individuals could ask to take some components of that training themselves, even if they're not a supervisor or manager yet, so that they could develop themselves in that category. So we are building constellations. The idea around constellations, just to be clear, is a ladder is I'm in bus operations and I, bus operator, street supervisor, like I just go up that particular line. The concept of constellations is you are an individual, and we have many, many jobs that have a core amount of skills, and you can go out in a variety of different directions within RTD, and we're developing programs and pathways to get individuals there if they so choose. So just wanted to give that additional clarity.
Thank you for that. Does that answer your question? Thank you, Director Lewis. Director Guzman, I saw that your hand was raised earlier. Did you have? I don't now.
Thank you. Director Lewis asked the question that I had at top of mind, which is, we'll see the bus and the other modalities brought forward in the same type of presentation, so we can understand comprehensively what's going on. We're one agency, but we have to take a look at different parts. So that's great. I would also just say for the record, Deborah touched on this, sorry, CEO Johnson touched on this, and it is really important. There are affinity groups that are adjacent to what we do. I just returned from Portland from the Latinos in Transit group, and they have an academy that you can sign up and go for if you are a member. There is a fee and a cost to doing that, but we are, as an agency, members of the Latinos in Transit. We support that work. There's the National Transit Institute through Rutgers University and the U.S. Department of Transportation. There are many, many opportunities for employees and board members to get training and further their careers in a variety of ways that are also not necessarily tied just to being employed at RTD, but also because we're in an industry that's so specific. Some are free, some do require a cost and a payment, but there are ways to help with that. And that's all, to my knowledge, part of what we do as an agency. Having looked at the finances for the last year and a half, I know that those line items are part of our budget. And so I'm excited to see that going forward. But that was, Deborah touched on it. So that was all I was going to add to that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Are there any other questions? I do have a comment. I was really pleased to see the agency scorecard, the annual scorecard. Although it is September, pardon me, I was wondering if you indicated, Mr. McKay, that the data for 2024 would be in this month. How soon would we be able to see the 2024 annual scorecard in the detail that was suggested? Excuse me.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure if I'm following you. So this, the green scorecard that we displayed earlier is the annual scorecard. The blue scorecard is the agency performance scorecard, which will be forthcoming here in the next discussion item. Is that, am I following you, or?
Both. And my question really is more about looking forward, and it's clear that you guys have done some really thoughtful planning about the scheduling and the cadence for this. And I just am anxious to understand when we can expect both of those scorecards to be presented to the board.
So, Committee Chair Kaplan, if I may.
Sure.
So in regards to bus and rail, as indicated, that survey is just been completed since the midst of September. That's going to come forward in October. What we're trying to do is sync all of this information up together, recognizing that it's optimal to do intercepts. The ideal point of time in which to do that would be either in September or in the April-May timeframe before school is out, because we need to ensure that we can capitalize on a large portion of our workforce. 2/3 are represented and they do their bids during the course of generally around April. So as we go forward, we will bring this in a way that basically has all the information gathered so we can inform and be intentional with budget planning. So we can do some refinements, recognizing that a presentation will be provided to you all in October. So i.e. looking at light rail and the key drivers, there's some tweaking that we can do to that. That's why it said sample. We will also look relative to if the impact of fares has any underlying concern for our customer base, recognizing that that was last year's data. And as Mr. McKay indicated, the new fare structure went in play to January. So we really don't know where we're going to get at this juncture, recognizing that we're supposed to get the information in quick order, but we will be intentional as we go forward, because this is incumbent upon us as we move forward, so we can be intentional with our planning and work towards a clearly defined purpose. I know that was a lot, but I was trying to answer the question.
And I did not phrase the question very well, but I guess going forward, it's just nice to know when to expect some of these pieces of information. And, you know, as we go forward, this was a really good presentation. It shows how deliberate you are in your strategic planning. I just in the effort of managing, or in the managing expectations, just to understand what we can see going forward. Mr. McKay.
Just to follow up, so that is correct, that the 2024 scorecards were predicated partially on 2023 data. Moving forward into 2025, the survey data for 2025 will impact the scorecard for 2025. So we'll be able to be a little bit more nimble once we have our survey data come to us earlier in the year.
Thank you. I like hearing that. All right. Are there any other questions on this topic? And so, the second item is for the financial success performance metrics. Once again, I'll turn it over to GM CEO Johnson and John McKay, Executive Business Partner, to present this item to the committee.
Thank you very much, Committee Chair Catlin. Once again, Deborah Johnson, General Manager, CEO, RTD. What we have before you is critically important as we talk about our financial success outcomes. Last March, this body collectively as the board had a discussion relative to what might be optimal capturing how we are looking at our financial success. Just saying 50% of what we spent wasn't necessarily something that was ideal for all of us, and we aligned around that going forward. So what we intend to do today, Mr. McKay, and then we do have Mr. Morgan that is present as well, who is stepping in for Mr. McLeod, who is on PTO this week, talk about how we incorporated what we saw relative to the Office of the State Auditor, but more intentionally, what are we doing relative to our wonderful ratings that we have got from PORS. And all of those different elements. So with that, I will yield the floor to Mr. McKay, and Mr. Morgan is here to address questions as well or add additional clarity.
Thank you. Chair.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So there's no great way to share this. Again, I will zoom in to the extent that I'm able to and try to show some of this information. So the scorecard, as printed and distributed in the packet, is largely the same as that seen previously in May and June of this year. So I'm just bringing this up right now. So like I said, this portion of the scorecard in relation to the first three strategic priorities of community value, customer excellence, and employee ownership are largely unchanged, or entirely unchanged, actually. The only addition is here on the second page under the financial success strategic priority. And so I'll just walk through each of these metrics as we're capturing them or suggesting being captured. So again, this is in development. The first metric that we're looking at is budget variability. This was one that was in the previous scorecard, and the definition is the deviation from the adopted budget. And let me go backward just one moment. So these metrics are directly related to these two performance inquiries as previously adopted by the board. So the questions are, how has RTD demonstrated good stewardship of taxpayer dollars, and how has RTD developed trust as the leader in mobility? And answering those questions, staff is looking at these particular metrics to be able to define those things. So next is cost per revenue hour, and the definition is the inflation adjusted operating cost per revenue hour. The inflation adjusted part is not something that was in the previous scorecard. I think that is a critical addition so that we can see over time as inflation increases are as they are. I think it's important that we are taking that into account as we're measuring this cost per revenue hour. Next is monthly reserves. There is the board's fiscal policy determines that a certain amount of reserves be maintained. Right now, we're looking at 3 months of monthly reserves, and we're measuring this on a quarterly basis. Next is debt service coverage, which is 1.2 times coverage. The next is the big one that we've developed. This is an annual metric because part of it is predicated upon survey data. It is a 3-part composite. It's called the Weighted Trust Index. It's a measure of our financial trust external to the agency, and includes the parts of the 9 state financial health ratios. These are the OSA, the Office of the State Auditor metrics that we just looked at in the green scorecard, the annual scorecard. I won't go through these, but collectively, our percentage of meeting these goals, these ratios, equates to 50% of the weighting for the Weighted Trust Index. Next is a bond rating. This is going to be Standard & Poor's. That is the most probably relevant to us, and that accounts for 20% of the weighting of this. And then the average of community survey responses to these 4 questions or prompts rather. RTD manages its financial resources well. RTD is a good financial steward of public funds. The community's investment in transit provides value, and RTD's financial reporting is understandable and transparent. So that equates to 30% of the overall score for this. And as I mentioned, that is an annual measure. These other ones are more frequent than that. And then this one and the last one, both because they're predicated upon survey data, they'll have to be an annual measure for now. And then the last one is the fare value, the percent of customers who agree or strongly agree that fares are reasonable. And I'm looking forward to seeing the survey data coming back from customers for bus and rail in the next week or so, so that we can see whether the implementation of the 2024 fare structure will have a strong impact on people's agreement with that question. And so with that, I will leave this up on the screen for discussion purposes, but I will yield the floor to directors for questions.
But first, Mr. Morgan, do you have anything to add to Mr. McKay?
Yes, good morning. I'm Brendan Morgan, Senior Manager of Debt and Investment Management here at RTD. I really have nothing to add. I think John walked through this well and hit on all the details, but certainly happy to discuss or answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I see Director Davidson's hand is raised.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for presenting this, and thanks to everybody for the good work on this. I think that particularly what's on the screen right now in terms of expanding upon this success outcome and having weighting be around more of our financial health ratios, really, really good work. So thank you for that. Also, thank you for adding budget variance into this. I know I've talked about that a number of times. I think that's an important thing for us to keep an eye on. Cost per revenue hour is great to see. Quick question on variance. Do we foresee reporting on this in a way, I think in the board briefing documents, if I'm not mistaken, we do look at the expenditure and revenue portion of this. Are we looking at tracking that separately, and how granular do you foresee going on tracking and reporting on our budget variance on a quarterly basis? And perhaps for General Manager and CEO Johnson, even to what extent might that influence? How granular would we get in setting any goals that may come out of that as we progress?
So one thing that's Madam Chair, if I may, yes, thank you very much, Chair Davidson, for the question. So I think one thing that's critically important as we have collectively looked at how we prepare our budgets, having worked with the CFO, what has been intentional and purposeful is meeting with the members of departments on a monthly basis as they go through their line items for their budget, so they can garner a better understanding of their expenditures, what has been encumbered and things of the like. So there are certain elements which are taking place in conjunction with the budget analyst. I can't speak specifically to how we're going to bring that forward. It has helped us better plan and prepare for budgets, but I do know that there is additional work that has been done. Mr. Morgan, do you have any additional information as it relates to that?
Thank you. I'd be happy to chime in. I know Doug has been working, CFO Doug McLeod has been working on this. Specifically, I know his intent, at least his starting point, was that he's hoping to clearly tie many of these metrics to our monthly financial statements and our annual audit, so that there is transparency and accountability for where these numbers are coming from. They can be relied on, etc. I think the actual format is yet to come in the future.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Director Davidson?
It does. Thank you. Yeah, I look forward to seeing that. Again, thank you. A huge step in the right direction of, putting that on the sheet and starting to, really monitor on that. So thank you, and fully appreciate that that's kind of chicken and egg influencing how we budget here. So appreciate that. Again, that I know, like the previous example I was asking about on the prior discussion item, has a lot of interdependency. So thanks for looking at it. I think it's a place where the board and the public can look, a sort of simple number that actually tells you how well those interdependencies are working together. So thank you for that. I do think, I just had one other question. I know I see cost per revenue hour. we've talked at some points, I think this question is for General Manager and CEO Johnson, around the concept of cost per revenue mile. It's challenging with our district, as we always talk about, with the large service area and our cost per revenue hour. There's some real intersection with also the distances and deadheading that we do and so forth. So does it make sense? Have we had conversations as a team around tracking our cost per revenue mile and how the intersection between, you know, revenue hour and revenue mile might inform us? I think this is one of the areas that I struggle when we see things like the operating expenses on an unlinked passenger trip basis. I think it's really difficult benchmarking against other agencies like we've talked about because of the characteristics of our modes and our distances. So I'm trying to find, the root of my question is, are there places that we can have several metrics that inform us how we're overall trending from an efficiency standpoint? And perhaps that's revenue hour with revenue mile. I don't know, but I'm curious what conversations have happened at the staff level on that.
So, Madam Chair, if I may proceed. So Chair Davidson, as it relates to cost per revenue hour, I would say we've had conversations around that. When you look at cost per revenue mile, you would see collectively that we're probably not as efficient just by virtue of the way our system is designed. And so as we talk about optimizing that, if there were a threshold, and there have been conversations as we looked at this, I was just meeting with Mr. Morgan just the other day about a different type of service as we look at rail operations, i.e. light rail and commuter rail versus, you know, the community's desire for other services that may not seem optimal just by virtue of the way the system's designed. And so as we look at it holistically, I would say that for us, it is advantageous for cost per revenue hour. It may put us in a very precarious position when you look at cost per revenue mile, because there's only so much density that this service area has. And it raises the question relative to the other services that are provided. And that's something that we could do, but what are we going to do with that data if we collect it? Are we going to be intentional and actually utilize it to optimize our transit service delivery model for the betterment of us being great fiduciaries? What is the core element that the core issue for which we're trying to solve? So I know I'm sort of talking around the issue, but I don't necessarily know with the way we're structured here, if that would yield something. It'd be different if we were, you know, a borough in New York where we could clearly see, or if we were a San Francisco that's 49 square miles that has a transit stop every 2 blocks. And so basically when we look at data points and we look at various performance indicators, we need to be very intentional about what we're trying to solve for. And right now, as we look at our budget, it's more or less ensuring that we can garner financial success, because doing a cost per revenue mile won't yield us that. That's in my humble opinion, as somebody who's been in this space.
Madam
Dr.
Chair, if I may.
Please.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback on that, General Manager and CEO. This is a question that I've had, especially as we head towards, I know it's a couple months out here, but as we're looking at our facilities and fleet transition plan and thinking about how our system operates. If we set goals around cost per revenue hour, there's things that we could do to cut down on, you know, for example, deadhead miles. But we're the only game in town, as we talk about, with this 2342 square mile service area. And so we have to serve a lot of areas where we have some of these cost inefficiencies. So if we set goals at the intersection of something like miles and hours, I guess I've been wondering to myself how that might influence the future of the system design as we look at where there's, you know, increased density development plans around transit-oriented communities and so forth, and how we might plan our facilities. So I guess thank you for commenting on it. And I just, from a board perspective, I'm trying to wrap my head around what are some of the things we could look at to not say, well, this is the one we're going to optimize, and then it's sort of, you know, cut off our nose to spite our face, and, you know, they're just kind of cheating ways to work some of these metrics, so to speak. And so thanks for commenting on that. I think we maybe don't need to answer it here. I want to just provide the context that it's something I'm thinking about as we head towards that transition plan in the way our system is designed, of what are the things we should be measuring and looking at to optimize when we're starting to think about the future of facilities. So if you have any further comments on that, happy to to kind of hear it. That's the context of where I'm coming from, and I really appreciate the context you just offered as well.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, if I can proceed and add a little additional context. I think what would be optimal as we go forward is really leveraging a comprehensive operational analysis. While that did start in 2019, that was branded as a system optimization plan. Utilizing a true COA going forward is where we could capitalize on what might be optimal relative to our service delivery model that takes into consideration land use and development and things of the like. And as we look to do that, most likely gearing up in mid of 2025, we can outline the scope of the COA relative to looking at the miles and other elements holistically as we want to ensure that we're cutting down on deadhead miles or layover times, because that will be important, especially as we look at different propulsion systems, recognizing that we are somewhat limited just by the geographic area in which we are located, and more specifically with the Four Seasons as well. So I just wanted to provide that color. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Are there any other questions regarding this matter? Okay. Excuse me. So Mr. Kroll had provided an email with a timeline on, well, I guess we're moving to other matters, forgive me. And this is on the 360 assessment tool. And I'd like to remind everyone that feedback on the tool for which you were provided a draft is due by tomorrow, September 17th. And comments can be emailed to Board Office Executive Manager Jack Kroll, and he'll compile all the comments and share with RKL, the board, and GM CEO Johnson on Wednesday, September 18th. So I know that I have received comments from General Manager CEO Johnson, but I would encourage other committee members to provide any feedback you have on the 360 assessment tool by tomorrow. Also, Mr. Kroll provided a timeline with assistance from RKL, and as said, that the feedback is September 18th for the performance assessment, or for the 360 assessment tool. And then deadline for feedback on the assessment tool is actually October 2nd. And that's after we get the information compiled on the 18th. Then I envision that we'll have a dialogue with Ms. Johnson, with directors, with Jack Kroll, and with RKL to finalize this tool. That's anticipated October 7th. We'll discuss feedback during the performance committee meeting and gain consensus on October 7th. Then the GM CEO's self-evaluation will be complete between October 15th and 18th. And correct me if I'm getting these dates wrong. Distribution of final board assessment and GM CEO self-evaluation to all board members October 28th. Closing of the board assessment November 6th. Analysis of results and finalization of the report November 12th. Delivery of the report to the board office November 13th. And then we will hold an executive session to discuss all components of GM CEO assessment on November 18th. That meeting will be an executive session with the complete board. So, Mr. Kroll, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Committee Chair Catlin. This is Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office. I just wanted to put an emphasis on what Director Catlin walked you all through was really two separate things there. You have the 360 assessment tool, which is going to be completed by 4 external reviewers, raters, 5 internal staff members, and 3 board members. The board members are going to be selected by Chair Davidson and Director Catlin to complete that. That is separate from the board's final assessment that will be developed and is under development in the coming weeks. That final assessment I think you all are used to getting in like late November, mid-November. You're going to get that about 2 weeks earlier this year once we agree to the timeline and get everything settled. And so just please keep in mind that those are two separate things. The 360 results, the GM and CEO self-evaluation, and the board's initial assessment of the GM and CEO through that final assessment form are all going to be discussed in an executive session in the evening on November 18th. What we haven't pinned down are the exact steps and dates after that. You all will need to complete a final assessment rating, pass that, and then have that approved by the full board as well. Those dates are still TBD, but you can imagine just typically that time of year gets a little crowded with the Thanksgiving holiday. You're probably looking at very late November, if not very early December, for the ability to meet as a performance committee to finalize the final assessment and then have that completed by the full board. So what I'm looking for by tomorrow is feedback on the specific 360 tool. That tool was presented in part by RKL at the meeting last week. I also emailed you documents related to that. So please go through and review those and submit any feedback you have to me by tomorrow. And if there are any questions about that, I think now's the time to hash it out so we're all on the same page.
Thank you, Mr. Kroll. And I want to emphasize one thing, and that is this 360 tool will not be used as a prescriptive point value for the evaluation. It's really meant to just inform, and it does not serve as a calculation in the GM CEO's performance. Are there any other comments about this? Jack?
Yes, sorry. Thank you very much for the opportunity to say one more piece. I think what's crucially important here to remember is that we are trying to design a process that you would use in perpetuity here. So the 360 tool will be something that could potentially be reused next year, as would the final assessment. So when you're reviewing these things, please focus on the lens of not necessarily who's in the room right now, although that matters, but you all, everyone on this call will be succeeded by somebody eventually, and have that lens as you look at this and really try to be as objective and high level as possible as you analyze these different tools.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. Are there, excuse me, any other comments regarding the 360? Are there any other matters to come before this committee? Director Guzman.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Really quickly, will we have an opportunity to have a conversation with our employee CEO as we go into this review process period, just to have time to have feedback with the employee? And that's usually an executive session. I know we have a lot on our plate. I'm asking if it's possible or what's possible as we move forward. That's one thing. And the second thing, just to put it on everybody's radar, Deborah is literally Wonder Woman. I do not know how she did it, but thank you. As the CEO and general manager of our transportation agency, flew out to Portland for a presentation and made time to be present with other transit professionals. I have to openly say this on the record. Often we're told it's not what's said to you when you're in the room, it's what's said about you when you leave. And Deborah, you had so much praise given to you, one, for showing up and being present, which was a big part of our conversation at this conference, but also just the reminder that we are truly blessed to have Deborah serving as our general manager CEO. And that's north, south, east, west, pick a place in the country, every professional, every CEO, every manager of operations or trains or anything, they showered nothing but praise on you. They were disappointed you had to leave so quickly, but totally understood. And I just wanted to bring that before this committee, since we are responsible for the review process going forward. I think it's really important to make sure that we call out high achievements and moments that are important for everybody to consider when we do that review process. So thank you, Madam CEO, and thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me have that opportunity.
Thank you, Director Guzman. To your first point, yes, there will be ongoing dialogue, particularly as it relates to development of the tool and also the composition of the 360 reviewers. And you reminded me of one other point, and that is that Chair Davidson and I will be appointing the 3 board members who will act as reviewers for the 360 process. And we have some thoughts about that, and we'll be reaching out to individual board members to gauge, number 1, their interest, and number 2, their availability. So that will take place in the next couple of days. Are there any other matters? Seeing none, with no further discussion, we will adjourn this meeting at 9:55 a.m. Thank you all for your participation and for for being patient with my voice and cold. Okay. Thank you.
Get well soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.